Hey everyone, can y'all hear me and see me okay? If you can, type yes in the chat box. And then I am going to get Danielle invited to the stage. Okay, Danielle, you can hear me. Good. Okay, I sent you an invitation. There you are. Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you tonight?
Very good. I'm trying to make sure my screen. You look taller than me even on this. How is that?
So I've got like my laptop is on its box that I bought it in, and then I've got like another card box underneath it.
That's smart. I need to
So
work on that.
it's looking down so you don't see my double chin. I've been shooting summit interviews. Whoops. So for everyone watching, the summit is coming up, the Elevate Pharmacy Virtual Summit, May 8th through the 12th. So I've been finishing up those videos. So that's what I've been working on today. How about you?
Today has been a pretty chill day. I have to say it's been, my husband took the little one out. So it's been a pretty,
Nice.
I had an actual chance to get some stuff caught up both home and with work. And that was very nice.
Yeah, it was really nice out here really all weekend. And, we moved into our new house and it hasn't, it's been cold and stuff outside. So I haven't really got to work in my gardens and all that. So that's what I spent a lot of time doing today after church. So it was a good day. So for you guys that are watching that don't know Danielle and I have known each other for what, three years now? 3 years now. We've masterminded together in a formal mastermind program. So I've talked to the Pharmapreneur Academy members. I'm going to be hosting a mastermind in Las Vegas, coming out to see you in September. And I want them to experience the joy of masterminding. So I'd love if you just want to start by kind of introducing yourself and introducing Businessese and a little bit about the background of the company and how you've gotten so involved in the consultant pharmacist space.
Sure. Well, I think that we can say that's all you. It's not a world that I know that well. But you know what? I find it fascinating because it's not something, if you're not in that space, you don't always know the different opportunities that are out there. So when you started talking about it, I was like, pharmacists can do all those things. That's so cool to me because it was just, I just joke with my pharmacist on a regular basis. I'm like, why don't you know my birthday yet? You've been seeing me for like 12 years. So anyway, but my name is Danielle Liss. I am a lawyer. I'm based in Las Vegas. I have a company called Businessese, and the goal with Businessese, it was really founded in order to create templates that specific businesses can use to help them grow. Because let's face it, if you go on LegalZoom, you're probably going to find a really basic template that might not necessarily cover your needs for your business. So our goal is really to create the forms that businesses need. And we do a lot of partnerships with certain companies like with you, where we find out what the needs of your community are so that we can create the kind of templates that your audience specifically needs. So that's really our goal.
I love it. So when we started talking about it, we were kind of brainstorming ideas. What do consultant pharmacists need? You guys have told me what you need as well. So I took this back to Danielle. We worked together on it and came up with 4 packages of different templates that I think will help you, save you a lot of time and money, not having to figure this out for yourself. So, one template that I've used personally from Danielle is the website policies bundle. So, many of us, we either pharmacy owners or we're trying to build an independent consulting business. We may be doing some, genetic testing or weight management coaching or whatever it may be. But a lot of us are, at least to the point to where we think we probably need to build a website at some point. So, Danielle, what is most important when it comes to putting up a website in terms of protecting ourselves legally? I know there's certain stuff like health disclaimers and all this stuff that you have to be careful about. So what are some things that we need to keep in mind that we need to put on our website as business owners that's going to protect us and protect the privacy of our users, our website users?
Sure. There's 3 main documents that you need for your website. The first one is the one that everybody has probably at least one time in their life checked a box saying that they have read it for another company and they haven't, and that's okay. I'm the person who goes in there for those. I understand if you don't. And essentially, those are your terms of use. What I want you to think of those as, that is your contract with your audience. So this is how they can use your website. It is talking about the intellectual property that's on the site, that you own that, how they may be able to use it. So for example, in the past years, we have seen a big increase in the use of social sharing plugins. So if you think about click that button to share it on LinkedIn or Facebook, those allow people to share certain content. So what does that do to the copyright rights? So we have different things included there so that you can really see what those different things are, because no one wants to write those, I'm quite sure. And you never know exactly what to include, from things like basic legal provisions like an arbitration clause or indemnity, things like that, to the more specific things like, these are my copyrights, these are my trademarks, and this is the kind of content that I provide. And depending upon what your pharmacist consultants decide to do, if you get into a position where you are either working as an affiliate or working with companies who are asking you to sponsor certain content. So let's say you work with doing health coaching or weight management, something like that. And you have a company that comes to you and says, we will pay you to promote our supplements on your website because you've become an expert in the space. Then you want to make sure you have certain things within your terms that talk about sponsored content and affiliate content. So in that package, what we've done is provided those terms. And if it's not something you're doing, it's easy to delete those and take them out so that you have what you need. Second policy is a privacy policy. And those are becoming so much more important because we're starting to see a lot more legislation around privacy. I personally think that that's a great thing, that we are ensuring that people's privacy is protected. My mom is I pick on my mom relentlessly when I talk about privacy, because she is the person who will be like, Danielle, I went to this website and clicked on the thing, and now Facebook is showing it to me. Can you tell me why they're spying on me? And I'm like, well, that's a pixel, Mom. And she's like, I don't know what that means. So it's one of those things where you want to make sure that your audience knows, what are you collecting? How are you using it? And who are you sharing it with? Last year in May, it was a tumultuous time in my legal world. And for most people here, you may remember that you were getting a weird number of privacy policy notice updates. That was because there was a European Union law called GDPR that went into effect. But we are starting to see comparable legislation that may come out here. California does require privacy policies. So if you have any audience in California or you are located in California, you definitely want to have a privacy policy. Now, the third thing is something that I think is particularly important for pharmacists, and that's a disclaimer. And I usually say, if you have a license of some sort, or you are providing instructions of some kind that somebody might use and have an issue with, that's when you want a disclaimer on your site. I do everything with a disclaimer. So everything you will hear, I am a lawyer, but I'm not necessarily your lawyer. So everything I'm telling you is for informational purposes only. So, and if you're anything like me and you have used WebMD at any point in your life, you will see it all over those sites where it will say, not your doctor, call your doctor. So it's important that in your role as a pharmacist that you are taking those steps to protect your license and say, this is for informational use only. This does not mean that we have any other kind of relationship unless you sign something else with me. I am not responsible for how you take this information and implement it in your life. So those are the three main ones.
We're also going to talk about the thing that you have them sign when they're going to come in. But I wanted to go back to the whole privacy policy. I mean, that's something that, you know, I knew you were going to talk about the GDPR because it was such a headache when the European Union implemented it. It really took a lot of people off guard. And I think, you know, just in kind of seeing what happened with that, if legislation like that does come to the U.S., and you know, it sounds like it's inevitable if California is already.
California has passed it. The key is that it's only for businesses who make 25 million or more, or are very specifically in kind of the data mining field. So for most small businesses, it may not impact them. but I will not be surprised when that legislation changes to impact more people, or you will see other states copying it. It's coming.
Interesting. Okay. So the three different forms included in kind of the website bundle, what you need for your website, where would you put them? Where would you recommend to put them on your website? I mean, we don't want to put them on the front page, but they have to be on there somewhere, right?
No, I agree with you. And that is one of the most common questions that I get. People are like, okay, I have it. I customize it. Now what? And what I usually tell people is create a footer link on your website. So if you're on WordPress or Squarespace, whatever company you are using, those are usually relatively easy to do. I usually would call it terms and conditions. If you want to break them into 3 different documents, you absolutely can. You can say terms of use, privacy policy, then disclaimer, and have them each as 3 separate links, paste them there, and that is going to be sufficient. If you have people if you're giving people the ability to give you money online, then you want to make sure that whatever you're using, and I think that most companies do, most e-com companies will require this, where you've got to check that box because you want to make sure that they know. And if you are selling something, you do want to revise your terms so that you've got some purchase policy information in there too, so that people know how do you make a return? How do you do this? How do you do that? You know, what is it? What are the terms of the purchase that they're making?
So I would say for most pharmacist consultants, you know, kind of the way that they're using their website is really to just, you know, get people familiar with their brand, talking about their expertise, and then hopefully they would kind of, you know, have a contact, you know, some kind of consultation call with them, and then decide to purchase. In some cases, I could maybe see if you were a pharmacy owner and wanted to sell like certain supplements or, you know, CBD oil or whatever it may be on your site, I could see that, you know, they might need some kind of purchase policy included. So I love that you mentioned that.
Or if you pay, or if somebody is paying for your time. So let's say you don't just do a discovery call when they contact you, they're paying you, like, let's say, the genetics piece. Let's say somebody submits their information to you, they pay you, and then you do a 1-hour consult with them. That would also be something, because I look at it as, where is the money changing hands? If the money is changing hand on the website, you want to make sure you have a purchase policy. If it is taking place after the fact, then you want to make sure you have a contract. So no matter what, you're going to have some kind of terms that your clients get. It's just a matter of where are those terms going to be served to them.
And so that's where you would include like the refund or exchange or whatever that policy. Yep. Okay. All right, cool. Well, I think that's helpful. Does anyone have any questions related to the website bundle, the different terms and policies and those templates that we need before we hop on to the next thing? Feel free to, you know, type your questions into the chat. If you don't get them in there by the time we move on, we'll leave some time at the end and we'll go back and look through the chat and answer some of those questions. So what I want to ask you about now is, so the pharmacists that come to me a lot of times, they are wanting to go out and collaborate with an existing business owner, or they're wanting to go out and collaborate with a physician. So kind of the next step would be formalizing that partnership with a potential client. Oh, Kay did have a question. Do you have a summary sheet of those areas? Are you asking about a summary of the different terms and conditions and the different things you need for the website? I'll be sending out kind of a summary of what we talk about tonight in the upcoming emails. So, and yes, Patrice, a replay will be available. I'm going to send out replays as soon as we finish up tonight. So hopefully no one else will have connection issues. Okay, Jennifer asked, how would you word a purchase policy for a diabetes educational consult for 30 minutes? So I think that question would be, are they paying for it on the website, or are you having a conversation with someone? And then, like, usually I recommend, if you've got something on the website, that you have some way that this lead can contact you if they're interested in booking a diabetes educational consult. And then you have the conversation that goes, here's what the thing is. Here's, kind of just talking to them about it for a few minutes. Would you like to move forward and book it? Wouldn't you say, Danielle?
You can do it that way. If you know that they want to book it, the kind of purchase policy that you would need there is, what I always tell people is, make sure you have, are there refunds available? So in most cases, if they are paying for your time and they show up, no, there's not going to be a refund available. That is what they are getting, is that 30 minutes of your time. If obviously they are prepaying for your time, you can let them know what your cancellation policies are. I think that one is really important, because you don't want somebody who's going to try to cancel 6 times or do it like 5 minutes ahead of time, and then your schedule is all messed up. So what I typically say is, tell people that they can give you a 48-hour notice. You can always make an exception. You can always say that you reserve the right to approve something for a refund or for it to be rescheduled. There, I think it's also really important, if you are providing things to them, let's say you have a handout, let's say you have a workbook, any type of material that you have created that would be part of your intellectual property. You also want to make sure that you have a license in terms of how they can use that, because that is your copyright. So you want to make sure that they know, and this is what I think is important, that it is for their personal use only, that it can't be shared. And the fact that they bought it doesn't necessarily mean that they have a right to do whatever they want with it. It is just for them, for their personal educational use only.
Good question, Jennifer. Okay, George is asking, when it comes to terms and conditions, how do they know that? I assume like in maybe the different states, it could be different. How do they know what they have is what they're supposed to have? How do they know that they are up to standard? Is there like an internet standard out there that you have to meet?
Of course there's not. Of course there's not.
It's business, so it's like...
There are generally things that you want to include, like, how do you use the site? What is prohibited? So when we talk about what's prohibited, it is going to seem so, honestly, sometimes it just feels stupid that you have to include these things, but you can say, you're not allowed to hack my site. You're not allowed to use my site to spam comment people. You're not allowed to use it to try to build your backlinks. Other things that are typically going to be important is, again, that intellectual property component. How can they use your content? Can they share it? Can they not touch it? Some people will say, if you credit me, you can do whatever you want with it. As long as I get credit, you can't just claim it as your own. The other pieces that I think are important are just those standard legal provisions where you're talking about, I'm not going to be responsible if my website goes down. You can't guarantee uptime. Everything provided is on an as-is basis. And then let them know what state you're in so that you can say, if anything happens, my law will control.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to the next one, where we were talking about, say, I'm an independent consultant pharmacist. I'm going out to the physician's office down the street. So I'm going out to a primary care center, say, hey, I want to come in as a consultant pharmacist and work for you guys 2 days a week. Now we just need to formalize that business agreement. So we're not at this point talking about a collaborative practice agreement. We're just talking about formalizing that kind of partnership and laying the ground rules for here's what it's going to look like in terms of what it's going to cost to acquire me as an independent contractor or even employee. So can you talk a little bit about what you've created based on kind of what I've been telling you about the consulting pharmacy industry and market?
Sure. What I think is the most important thing to remember is, I want you to put every single thing in writing. I cannot say this enough times, because I think a lot of times, as you're saying, this is something that can happen relatively early on, right? So make sure that you aren't going into things with just a handshake deal, because that is typically where I see things break down. So what we have done with our template is really looked at what are the most likely scenarios, because that's everything that you taught me about. There's so many letters that I would get them all wrong if I tried. Was there one that was like CCM or something like that?
Yeah, CCM. Yeah.
I remembered when I didn't just change it all in my head. So I think because there are so many different scenarios, your agreements can vary considerably. But the things that you really want to lay out are, what is the scope? That is really the most important thing, because you're not creating a joint venture. You're not creating a new sort of business together. You're not creating a partnership that could have some tax liabilities. You're just doing a collaborative arrangement. So here's what those terms are. What falls within the scope of that agreement? Then you want to talk about what happens with money. The money is always going to be something I want you to cover. What is the compensation? Are they receiving a cut of what you do? Is there a fee per visit? What does that look like? And spell it out. What happens if someone wants to leave the collaboration? What happens? Because if there are things that are created as a result of the collaboration, let's say there's intellectual property, how do you treat that after the fact? Who owns what at the end of the day? And then other things that I think are really important is just to make sure, are you aiming to have exclusivity with them? If you do, absolutely make sure that that's put in. Is there a non-solicitation provision, or non-circumvention, I think, is one that people may not be as familiar with. There's certain categories that fall into the world of what we call restrictive covenants. And the restrictive covenants that most people know are non-solicitation and non-compete. Non-compete is typically that you will, during the term of the agreement, and then often for some period after, will not work for a competitor. You won't start a competing business, that type of thing. Non-solicit means you're not going to go after somebody's clients, or they're not going to go after your clients. It could be their employees. It could be, really, it can be a very wide range of who they will not try to go after. Non-circumvention, I think, is a really interesting one that a lot of people aren't familiar with, where it is, you can't cut somebody out of the deal. So
I think that's important.
Yeah. So if somebody came to you and they said, hey, can you give me a lower price if we just, do this under the table, so to speak? Then the answer there is, you've got this agreement in place to ensure that neither party will do that. So I think those are really important to look at, to make sure that both of you, both businesses, know exactly what to expect, because it's surprises that usually cause problems where you've got to then call the lawyer in. First question I ask every client is, so what did your contract say? And the number of times I hear people say, I did not have a contract. I'm like, okay, let's try to piece something together, because you can always try to come up with something, but much better to have it set and in stone before you really get started there. Because it is, like I said, whenever there is a license involved, I get very nervous about making sure that everything is in writing. I won't do anything unless I have a contract that goes along with it. So I think it's really important for you to define how your license is being used and what kind of services you're providing along with that.
So the thing that came to my mind when you were talking about this, a lot of pharmacists are interested in helping physicians put the genetic testing, the pharmacogenomic testing, in their practices. And so one pharmacist had asked me, they were like, so I'm kind of working with this pharmacogenomic lab and sort of on their behalf reaching out to local physicians and saying that I would come in, I would get the program set up, I would kind of figure out work out the kinks, see some patients, get it started. And then, and then they were like, and then what's keeping them from then saying, okay, well, we don't need you anymore. We're just going to do this in-house. So I love that you mentioned the non-circumvention policy in that collaborative business agreement. So I think that's fantastic. You mentioned that.
And the thing to remember there is those timeframes can vary. I think in the template, we have it written at 12 months. Okay. So for a year, you wouldn't do any of those types of things. But what you can say is, and I will warn you, California gets a bad rap whenever I talk about stuff, but restrictive covenants are not viewed well in California. During the term of the agreement, it's fine, but they are and some states this also happens, where they do not want to see restrictive covenants after the term ends, because they don't want to stop people from doing business. But I think when you're talking about non-solicitation, and basically you're saying you're not going to steal patients from one another, I think that is reasonable to expect, or client lists that come out of things. So you can say within there, who do these clients belong to at the end of the day? Is this a list that you share, or is this a list that belongs to you only and not the other company? So it's that type of property that you really do want to lay out and say, anybody who signs, mine. anybody, yes, you referred them to me, but that doesn't mean you get access to any of the bigger, whatever the files are, et cetera. So just make sure that those terms are really the ones that you've outlined well so that everyone is really clear.
So another, opportunity I see to use this collaborative business agreement, if you're, say, an independent pharmacy owner and you're wanting to do some kind of partnership program with a physician, there's definitely, the stark antitrust laws that you have to be careful when, that you're not getting a kickback or giving a kickback to the physician. So that was something that we wanted to be sure and include that so that it's very clear what the partnership, what the business agreement looks like, and that it protects you as a consulting group or as a pharmacy owner or whatever it may be, in that, you're spelling it out in black and white, that there's no other opportunities for exchanging money or anything like that. So
yeah. And what I always say there is make sure we can never guarantee that something isn't a violation, right? So it's always going to be up to you to make sure that make sure you know the anti-kickback statutes. And as long as you feel that you are falling within one of the exceptions and that there's nothing else, you can say this was created for the following purposes, which is an exception here. And you can say that this is not meant to be one of those things. It's not going to guarantee it 100%, because if a court says you violated the law, then you've got to prove that you didn't. But it does give you some basis to say, no, we looked at this, we made a good faith effort to make sure that this was not a violation of any type of kickback legislation.
I think that's really important to note. So does anyone have any questions about the collaborative business agreement? So will there be some sample agreements for each of the scenarios? Yeah, we're kind of talking through the different examples that each of these agreements could kind of be used for. But the way that we've created these templates are so that you can go in and you can change, whatever you need to. So Danielle, you might be able to answer that a little bit better in how. I've seen them. So how would you describe it and how you can really go in and make these templates your own?
They're customizable Word documents. So, okay. And when I say customizable, I mean things like this line is highlighted, so you know to replace something here. And they also come with a PDF of instructions, because for some of them, it's pretty straightforward. And you're like, I don't need to watch the video for this. And then there are others where they're more in depth, where we do have explainer videos. So that way, if there's anything you're not sure about, you can get clarification. Because as far as I'm concerned, you should be at least, you need to have a working knowledge of whatever is in your contracts. You might not be the legal expert who can get into every nuance of what indemnity means. And I understand that. But you should have a working knowledge of what those provisions are. So the explainer videos are really about laying it out. Like, this is what this clause means. Here's what you can do. And I also am a big believer in, I think some people get a little nervous when it comes to modifying language in any type of agreement. Mm-hmm. So I am very clear. If you don't need this, you can delete it. You don't have to have a non-solicitation provision. You don't have to have a non-circumvention provision, but they're there just in case they are needed for the scenarios that you're working in.
I think that's helpful. And so, one thing that I was able to do with mine, we ended up for the summit. So before I use people's, face and picture and promote it on my social media, I went and got a business likeness agreement from Danielle, and was able to really put in there, I'm using this specifically for this purpose. And so it was really, really easy to use, because like she said, everything's highlighted, so you can just kind of piece what you need. So the way I see in kind of the timeline, the flow, so to speak, in you're going out and soliciting your clinical pharmacy services to a primary care clinic. They are like, yes, come in, you go in, you talk to them, maybe put some ideas down. Definitely, I always teach Academy members to go in with a list of questions. So you're digging, you're trying to find their pain points, you're writing down what they say, you're using their words, And then you put a proposal together. And the proposal doesn't have to be like a ready to sign contract, but what I like about having these business agreements is it gives you kind of a starting place on what you might want to include and what you might not. So going back in with a proposal and then having, working on it with the client and talking about here's what we're comfortable with and whatever, and then going and really solidifying that agreement. I mean, being able to do that instead of having to hire, your own counsel and have them in these meetings. I mean, that can add up really quickly.
Yes, it can. I can tell you, when I was practicing, my rate was, approaching $400 an hour. So it can definitely get very costly. But what I think is a really great thing that you can do is your proposals often just lay out your scope of work, right? So it's up to your contract to lay out what the rest of the details are. Because let me tell you, most people don't go in thinking my invoices are going to be net 45 and these are the ways that you can pay. And I'm going to definitely reserve the right for a late fee. And here's how we terminate. Those are just some of the details that I think if you put all of that into your proposal, you're going to have like 10 pages. And most of the time you want something shorter, of course, so that it's much easier to say yes. So what I typically tell people is get a proposal signed off on that they've accepted it and let them know that everything else will be coming. Usually when they're signing off on a proposal, one of the things that I say you can do is that locks them into a certain amount of pricing so that they have 30 days to sign their contract before that pricing expires. And then you can always put that on as an attachment to any contract that says, and it refers back to the proposal. And then you just incorporate the language from the proposal into your client contract.
I think that's helpful. So you don't have someone coming back 2 years later saying, you gave me this price. Now I want you to come in and
I've seen that happen to so many people. And I'm just like, oh, no, you don't charge $50 an hour anymore. And they're like, well, I feel bad. And I'm like, no, you don't have to. Your price has changed. Go get that,
Yeah, exactly. So I love that you said that. So, now kind of moving forward in the timeline, you're seeing your first patient, whether that's, in a community pharmacy setting, it may be like the diabetes education consult Jennifer mentioned, or it could be you're kind of a standalone service. So you've just had an appointment and you're bringing that patient in. What do you need in terms of an agreement with the patient that outlines what the patient's going to receive, the privacy, the refund, all that stuff with the actual patient?
What I tend to do there is a client agreement. And for your client agreement, there's a few terms that you always want to make sure that you have. Number one, everything about payment. And a lot of people are just like, this says the dollars. And that's perfect. You want it to say the dollars, but you need everything else that goes with it. How do you get paid? When do you get paid? What is the time frame? And is there anything you have to do in order to get paid? So do you have to submit something for approval prior to sending an invoice? What has to be done? So what I always try to tell people is make sure it's clear, not only the money, and particularly, let's say that you have somebody who signs up to do, let's say you're doing weight management, right? And they are looking to come in, maybe it's once every 2 weeks, once every month, whatever the case might be. If that's going to be an ongoing program,
right?
How does that work? So let's say you're charging them, and I will warn everybody, I cannot do math on the fly. So I am going to keep round numbers. I am sure your rates are probably higher than this, but I can't do the math. So let's say that this is going to be a 6-month agreement and it's $100 a month. So it's $600. If all you put in is $600, when do you get that? It's particularly confusing when it's more than just one service. It's not a one-off. It's kind of a month-to-month situation. So you can put there, you'll pay me up front completely. You will give me half now, half when I bill you, which will be 3 months out. You can make that structured into whatever way you want. What I strongly recommend is don't start working until you have been paid something, because then that makes sure that you have some protection there so that you aren't always in collection mode with people. So if you can get them to give you a deposit or to prepay for the services, I usually recommend that. And you can always say there, in terms of payment, then also what happens if something terminates. So let's say that 6-month client comes back to you and they say, 3 months, I don't want to do this anymore. Or let's say it's a woman who has gotten pregnant and it's not going to be something that she can do while she is pregnant. Okay, here's how you terminate. And the same things go there. How long does it take? what has to be done, and then what happens. So if somebody paid in full, are they eligible for a refund then? Or does it just mean that their services stop? Is it something where they have to give you 30 days notice, 14 days, 7 days? I've seen some that they keep it immediate. One thing I strongly, strongly recommend is make it mutual. Make sure you save yourself. I think everybody has maybe had a client who they wish they didn't have at some point, and they're like, I wish I could fire them. Make sure you keep that right for yourself, that you can fire them if you don't feel the relationship is going the way that it should. For the type of work that we are talking about, confidentiality is key. So obviously the healthcare information, you want to make sure they understand that this is going to be under HIPAA, but they may also get different things from you depending upon what kind of work you're doing. So let's say you are producing workbooks, and let's say that you're really giving them a detailed map of how you do certain things. You want to make sure that certain things are protected and held confidential. So we also make sure that those pieces are covered as well, even if it's not just that healthcare information, that you also have a confidentiality provision. And in terms of if you are giving people something that you have created, who owns it? How can they use it? Just kind of like it was the same thing that we talked about in the purchase policy, a license for how do you use these certain things. And the most key piece of this is I always put this in an exhibit, which is the scope of work. So if you had a proposal signed and you have all the terms there, great. Just attach your proposal. That's where the scope of work is. Perfect. But if not, make sure it's clear. Because one of the things that I think happens most frequently to consultants is scope creep. Do you talk about this in the Academy, Blair?
No, I haven't introduced this language yet.
Okay. When we talk about scope creep, that means that you have signed an agreement and you know what you're supposed to do, but you've got this client who keeps coming back and kind of pushing what those boundaries are and saying, can you just look at this real quick? Or maybe it's somebody who has become demanding in terms of your time. And you're like, I can't respond to you within 4 minutes every time you send something. I can't do X, Y, and Z. So you can always make sure that you have that mapped out in your agreement. You know, here's how you communicate with me. Same thing about cancellation policies. Put those things in writing so that there is not that person who is taking advantage of the contract because it's silent. Put those in there. So it's really clear, like you can't try to reach out to me on Facebook. You can only reach me via the email that I've provided to you. And I think that makes more sense with a lot of the work that you would be doing because HIPAA. So I think it's really clear to say, you know, you need to contact me in this channel. And here's what you can expect in terms of response times, because if somebody asks you for something that's outside of the scope of the agreement, you want to be able to go to them and say, this wasn't something that we included there, but I'm happy to give you an estimate on what that would cost. It should be a really simple conversation that says, you know, I understand that you'd like to do more. I would love to keep working with you. Here's how many dollars you need to pay me, so that they don't think it's under the umbrella of what you had originally done just because they had a new idea.
Okay, I love it. So Geneva asked the specific consent forms for pharmacogenomic testing. So what we're talking about is really these legal forms, these templates are customizable. So if you're working with a specific pharmacogenomic lab, they may still want you to do a patient consent for the lab to be able to collect their DNA. So that might be something completely different. So really what we're talking about now is more like a contract between you and the patient, right, Danielle?
Exactly. And one other piece that I love to include in these contracts is a disclaimer that essentially says, what I'm giving you is not just some like hokum that I've made up out of thin air. This is based on something that I believe to be accurate and scientific. And then you can go to them and say, however, I can't guarantee what your results are going to be. You can never guarantee how somebody implements information that you have given them. So we also can say that you are not liable if they don't feel like they got the results that other people have.
Yeah. Okay. So she clarified she meant consent forms for patients. So yeah, if we're going back to the timeline, the person comes, says, yes, I do want a pharmacogenomic consult with you. So then I would give them the client agreement. This is how much is due at the time of service. It has all that stuff in there for me. They sign it, pay. then we go to do the swab. Then they're signing a consent form for me collecting their DNA. So they're signing consent forms that I'm then passing along to the lab saying, I did not take this under patient's duress or anything like that. So this is kind of two different things. I want you to think about the client agreement in terms of a contract of, here's what you're going to pay me and here's what you're going to get from this service that I'm offering. And I love, Danielle, that you mentioned recurring payments. So a lot of community pharmacies, we're seeing an increase in people that want to do functional medicine and integrative medicine. And that really is kind of an ongoing thing. That would be something that we would see patients, once a month or once a quarter or whatever it may be. So really clearly saying this is going to, be a charge that's due at the time of service, before we start, or you can pay it, in one lump sum ahead of time, maybe get a discount or something along those lines. And then also the cancellation policy and the refund, super important. So, okay, she's going to send their pharmacogenomic results to their physician. So yeah, you'd still need to get. You would
definitely want to have a release there that they would be giving you permission to send that over to whatever professionals, and that I would treat as a standard medical information release, like you would for any kind of medical information saying, here is, I am getting this, whatever it might be, whatever kind of testing, these are the results, et cetera. I have given you authorization to send this to whomever it is. And I understand that this is, protected information, whatever the case might be. I always say, I love to put a lot more in releases to make sure that you have really covered yourself. So they are very, very clear. I understand that X, Y, and Z is going to get sent to the following people, and I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep. Making sure they understand that up front. Absolutely. So I think that's important. That's also something you can kind of keep in mind if you wanted to eventually go reach out to that provider. I mean, like, oh, that genetic information that I have been sending you, how about we do some kind of, there's a potential for it, I
think that you can turn everything into a sales pitch for repeat business and like new business and stuff like that. And I think that's a perfect way to do it. I love it.
Yeah. Yep. So now, kind of moving on, things are going great. We've been seeing growth in the patients that we're working with, and more providers are wanting to work with you. But the problem is I've maxed out my patient load for myself. So how do I bring someone in to work under me? And again, this is kind of like, goes back to the circumvention thing, without having to, to worry about the hassle of a full-time employee and trying to figure out all the tax stuff. But, if I wanted to hire someone to come in as an independent subcontractor under me as an independent contractor, how would I do that? And what would that look like, that contract?
Sure. What you're going to do is you absolutely, please get this in writing, because this is it's just such touchy areas in terms of everything that's confidential, making sure that people are protected. Please make sure you get this in writing. What I recommend here, and I think there's two things that people will often do in this case. There would be hiring an independent contractor, and there would also be hiring an intern. So I think that those are great ways to do this. What I recommend there is, again, make it specific, have all of those terms clearly outlined. How does payment work? Is it based on per patient, how are you doing that? And it could be an hourly thing, whatever makes the most sense. You can outline that there. If they are an intern and they are doing something for credit or experience, whatever the case might be, you can also say that, this isn't in exchange for compensation. However, here's what you're getting. And then making sure that everything else, you want them to mirror your agreement with your clients. So if you say that something is going to be confidential, it's going to be confidential for them too. If you say that something belongs to you and is only for your use, great. That's how it works for them as well, that they can only do certain things that fall under the umbrella of how they should be working with you.
I think that's definitely, when we're looking at, growing our consulting businesses, hopefully, there will be such a demand for pharmacist services that we will, we'll have these relationships kind of already created with providers. So one thing that I'm sure you've heard me lament about, which is provider status, and pharmacists are one of the only people I can think of that has a doctorate degree that is not that's in the healthcare profession, but is not considered a healthcare provider. So we cannot bill for our services. The only way the pharmacist really gets compensated at all is through selling, like if we're talking about community pharmacies, through the dispense of medication. So what we're seeing now is in pharmacists offering clinical services, we don't have provider status yet, but there's bills in the House and Senate. And what I see is this is an early opportunity. And once those bills do pass, you're still going to have to get your, collaborative business agreement set up. You're still going to have to get your collaborative practice agreements. You're still going to have to get all these things in place, because it's not like we're going to be able to put up a primary care clinic of just pharmacists and just do whatever we want. We're still going to have a collaborative provider, and we're going to be considered sort of like physician's assistant or nurse practitioner. So we would still be considered, a non-physician provider. So what I see is really getting these pieces in place for your business can help you grow and scale quickly, especially when big opportunities come up. And that's what I'm excited about for people.
I love it. Anything where people are going to grow and go into new areas that are so cutting edge and they're going to be so big, I think it's so much opportunity.
Yeah. So right now, we're putting these pieces in place, helping you guys to build the foundation of your business, making sure, you're sound legally and you're covered in what you need to do. So when these opportunities come, it's not like, I have no idea what else to do, and you kind of miss that boat. So when you kind of are able to get these pieces figured out to your business, you can then look at ways to grow and really dream big. And so you're not having to kind of like hold yourself back because you're like, oh, I don't know, I hadn't figured all this part out yet. It's like, it's okay. You've built a good foundation for yourself, and you should feel confident in growing your services. So can you, Danielle, just kind of go back and give us a little bit of a review of kind of the 4 forms or 4 templates that we've been talking about, and how you've put together this opportunity for consultant pharmacists, and put together these videos that help explain how to use them, and they can go back and really use them at any time they need them.
So what I have done is kind of put together exactly what we talked about: templates that are easy to navigate, that cover the most common areas, and also give you some suggestions for things that you may want to also think about. So for the website policies, it does include it's a disclaimer specifically written for pharmacists, the privacy policy that has a ton of things in there to really guide you through some of the different places that you may not think about where information is collected and the type of merchants that you might be sharing with. And then for the terms of use, those common areas. And then we also have the collaborative business agreement, which has those common areas that we think are the most necessary. And then the client agreement, same thing, how to keep it specific, how to make sure that both you and your client know what's happening and what your rights are. And then the last piece would be the contractor or intern agreement as your business is growing.
Okay. So does anyone have any questions about any of these templates or how they could be used? Danielle, we got about 10 more minutes. And, one thing that I thought of too, that we wanted to make sure we included was the provisions that have to do with HIPAA, especially, when we're talking about patients signing contracts with us, and also an independent contractor or someone, working with other entities. So I think that was really something we wanted to make sure that you've got that included in these templates too, right?
Yeah, we made sure that HIPAA is included. And what are some of the other things that you think about? Like if you're hiring someone else to work with you, then what do you need for them? And like, how do you use practice management software? Where do they need to enter their records? Things like that. Those little things that you may not think of where you're just like, my files are a mess now because you're not doing things the way I needed you to. So that type of thing, we are absolutely making sure that everything is covered.
Okay, so we got some questions. Nicole asked, is there a bundle of everything like you could get if you got all four? Do you still need to get them all four separately because they're each explained in a different way, right?
Correct.
Okay. So yeah, they're not like you could buy all four of them. You could just go back and then you'd be able to review the videos for each of them and exactly what you wanted. So we wanted to make sure to, you know, what you get what you need, but you also are very supported in the template that you need to use and understanding how to use it. So do we have the templates in Spanish?
I do not. There, I typically say, because I think there can always be some questions about translations, whether or not something was put perfectly. So I typically say there, if you need it translated, you've got the English version. If you need to have it translated into Spanish, that would then be your responsibility.
Yeah. Okay. Sabrina asks, if you have a pharmacist who wants to volunteer their time to help you, would you still need an independent subcontractor agreement with that person? And would you treat the pharmacist like an intern and specifically say there's no money exchanging hands?
I would, because I think that no matter what, it's still going to be really important that they are treating your clients and their agreement mirrors everything that you want your client experience to be. So from there, I would definitely say put it in writing, even if it's something relatively simple that simply says this isn't for payment. If you're not going to stop working for me, like my big thing when we're talking about like if somebody leaves, you don't want to be left in a situation where you're just like, oh my gosh, now I didn't have enough notice. I didn't get 2 weeks. I didn't get a month. I didn't get whatever. And now I'm just, kind of scrambling to put things together. So to make sure that some of those things are covered. And you can also say, the internship language is offered as a clause in the independent contractor agreement.
Right.
You can make sure that that is clear, that they are doing it for, what are they doing it for? Is it for experience? You can say that it's for experience, that type of thing.
I love that. Great question, Sabrina. I was going to see if I could just share the screen to just show you guys without, I don't think it'll kick you off, Danielle. I think it'll
be here.
Yeah.
Look at that.
There we go. Look at us.
This is getting kind of Brady Bunch.
All right. So this is what we created. This is Danielle's site, thebusinessese.com/PharmD. So it just kind of explains the different templates that we've talked about here today. You can go on and get the website policies bundle, the collaborative business agreement, the independent contractor agreement, and the client agreement. And, once you purchase those, they'll be instantly available for download. You can download them. You can, view the videos that Danielle has included. Just any questions at all that you kind of, Danielle, talk about, what's the policy look like in terms of if they have a question about changing something or using them? What should they do? Is there a way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm happy to take questions via email. It's questions@businessese.com. And I can't give you legal advice. I can give you information on what things mean. I can give you information on what you can and can't customize. But if it's legal advice, and I will be the first person to tell you, we're not a law firm, so you're going to need to reach out to your lawyer. And typically there, I can often recommend people for you, depending upon what you're looking for. Like if you were looking for something that's very state specific regarding, state kickback statutes, that's probably going to be something I would say, I don't necessarily know somebody in that field, but for most other things, I can typically find you a great provider.
That's awesome. Well, thank you very much for that and for sharing. I shared, your email, and I'll share it with people as well. If you guys have any follow-up questions for me or for Danielle, all you have to do is just hit reply. I'm going to send out the replay to this and also share the links again so that if you you need some time to kind of think about it and have any questions for us, just feel free to reach out and I can definitely get in touch. So Danielle, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. It's been a joy to have you. I love that our worlds have merged in like this. It's so fun. So we've known each other since early 2017 and have been, just seeing the growth of each other's businesses and as moms of dinosaur lovers and all that. It's just so much fun. So I really appreciate you. And we want to turn you into an advocate for pharmacist advanced clinical services.
I am all for it. I don't know who you need me to talk to, but I will happily do so.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Thank you all for being here with us tonight. And I would love to hear what you think. And if you have any follow-up questions for me, just hit reply to any of those emails that we've sent out reminding you about the webinar. Until next time, thank you so much for being here. I will see you on our next live webinar.